Once again, I've been struggling to find my creative voice, well, critical voice, trying to figure out how and when to best do this video critique thing. I mean, have you seen YouTube's infrastructure? At this rate, we might end up getting a tangible alternative after all. But once again, the game to drag me back into it is Danganronpa. Now, I've bought a few new games this year, and Persona 5 was another title I refused to wait until after the momentum died down to look at, but V3 was so obviously going to be my most anticipated title of the year. I mean, after buying the first two games on separate occasions, creating several Danganronpa characters in Rock Band 4 times, charting a song from the soundtrack, making a bad Death Grips remix from the soundtrack, based my entire online image around it, cross-playing as one of the characters, and even using Danganronpa as a conduit to meet new people locally. Yeah, this is the franchise I've thrown myself behind. And I think a big reason why is not just because it has more going on under the surface than might first appear, but because it's probably the leading franchise that's stylistically walking the line between niche and mainstream to capture that nirvana that understands audience investment in interaction and the tropes that bring these feelings to life. I think Spike Chunsoft picked the right time to start pushing the hell out of the property, even if what they used to do it wasn't always up to snuff. In hindsight, the anime was pretty terrible, I feel secure in saying that. But the outliers of End of Hope's Peak and Ultra Despair Girls never bothered me in their mediocrity. I got what I expected out of them. The question is, as a mainline title, does V3 re-establish where it works best, or does it succumb to the folly of the technically two most recent entries? If you're worried about spoilers, I wouldn't until around the end of the video. You are Kaede Akametsu, Ultimate Pianist, stranded in the Ultimate Academy for Gifted Juveniles, so not quite a prison that the first batch of promotional material led you to believe. But yes, once again, the bear is back and has trapped 16 high school students and forced them to play in a killing game. With exception to the new explicit rule of the game continuing until there are 2 left standing, which would be the implicit outcome anyway, and Monokuma being a father now, it's the same setup. Which I'm okay with. The biggest dalliances have been the biggest failures so far. At the same time, it demonstrates the issue of a massive fan like me reviewing the game. The biggest observations I have are just comparisons to the other two. If you saw my review of the first, a lot of those ideas still hold true. Danganronpa is still a bit better about respecting player intelligence than Ace Attorney. There's still a good path from murder to solution and discovery, and while it has somewhat simplistic themes, it pulls them off with more tact than you'd expect. There is one thing I don't think I mentioned earlier that sets this series apart, and that's the presentation. How many visual novels have you played that have been just that? Even with a few more under my belt, the immediate dismissal of the genre as using prose as a crutch for presentational value in a fairly inherently visual medium still holds up. Dare I count how many crappy Renpy games exist? But Spike Chunsoft spent some cash on this one. I can't really show it off, but the floating dialogue during the non-stop debates in this one is more dynamic than ever. It'll make weird movements and has a humorous pop to it. It really brings out the cheeky absurdism of the game. The diorama-like nature of every room loading in with their assets all jumping out looks really good. The artwork remains fantastic, although I think some of the character sprites might have artifacting. But I mean, Danganronpa has always been on the bleeding edge of presentation when it comes to this genre, but I've never given it enough credit. Even something like Steins Gate pales in comparison, and it ties the disparate elements of the atmosphere together nicely. As far as direct improvements go, there are 2 that stood out. Firstly, I've always maintained that Danganronpa's actual gameplay segments were better in concept than execution, but V3 feels the tightest both because of the mechanical improvements to the class trials and some of the writing. Early DR has struggled with the intuitive answers it presents to the player, and anyone familiar with the words "on the meat bone" can agree. V3 had maybe 2 instances of forcing me to pick one avenue of discussion over another, but otherwise has far better flow from puzzle to puzzle, which makes it feel a lot fairer. The interface for non-stop debates is also a lot cleaner this time around, even if aiming remains finicky. And for whatever reason, the transitions between different minigames makes more sense. One such minigame is the Scrum, where the surviving party splits into 2 debate teams and you have to match the right subjects on the fly. It doesn't come up often, but it's a good test of your attentiveness and actively gets the whole class involved. It's good stuff. And hey, Hangman's Gambit wastes the least time in this version. That's cause for celebration because fuck Hangman's Game. Another improvement I expect to be called out on is the cast, which is actually a funny story within itself. Each game has had at least one character I wanted to reach through the TV and punch, but I gotta say, there isn't really anyone like that in V3. The reliance on gimmickry, repetition and one-upsmanship isn't on display for whatever reason, but that may also be because they're plain having trouble writing new personalities, because at the same time no one captured my attention like an Ibuki or a Gundam. By the end I knew who everyone was, but damn if it didn't take a while for that sense of personality to develop. But I didn't feel like anyone hogged the spotlight either, which I will take as a fair compromise. Even the Monocubs grew on me, although the way they announced themselves in every conversation so long, farewell, was distracting the whole way through. But even this somewhat positive takeaway highlights my overall thoughts on V3. After seeing it through, I gotta say, it lacks the punch of the other two. V3, out of maybe the whole series, is arguably the most focused on simply telling a story. This means it lacks the unique atmospheres and hooks of the first two. My opinion of them has flipped after a replay earlier this year, by the way, but I still hold the first in high regard for its edge of creeping dread, and the second game is still a fairly fresh entity, an emotional rollercoaster with a climax of paranoia and disassociation that makes it still one of the most gripping things I've seen. When I try to think of the immediate identifier of V3 along those lines, I honestly can't. It's a Danganronpa sequel, which is a big problem. A more quantifiable reason is its pacing, specifically the exposition regarding the wider mystery and how well it integrates with the killing game. V3 has very signposted moments where a new development will occur, or something will happen to spur the story along, with only a few incidental lines of dialogue as foreshadowing to use as more personable clues. The school expanding between chapters is the expectation, but developments on their memories or awareness of the situation come at the usual points, making the pacing very systematic. Trigger Happy Havoc also had a very systematic framework, but it actively used it. It understood that familiarity breeds contempt, married that with the fact that they were all trapped in a school environment, and with it gave you even more reason to try and escape. V3's story, in comparison, is way too passive. Even as they say they'll try and look for a way out, the kids will just end up waiting for the next big milestone to spur them along. The killing game, paradoxically, becomes both this distraction to the story and the only real hook, and even then it takes ages for the game to get to first blood. Granted, the second half of this game is a lot better about this, with more natural suspense and tone as you get both more answers and questions. By the end, I think it turns out alright, but the dragging pace is a consistent sore spot until the last few chapters, which do feel suitably explosive and reintroduce punch into the narrative. This isn't helped by dialogue that has lapsed a bit, it's just way too easy for the story to get distracted by small arguments and avenues of discussion. The Monocubs weren't as annoying as I thought they were going to be, but their infighting outstays its welcome in short order. Overall, my playtime was apparently around a third longer than the last two, and boy did it feel it. This isn't helped by some signposting in the killing game itself. To be fair, the series has always struggled with giving away its impending scenarios too early, but in every chapter the tentative murder scene can be spotted from a mile away. The only reason a story like this would highlight elements like special locks or peculiar mechanisms is if they were going to be part of a murder plot. Anytime some environmental exploration points this out, it's just an invisible countdown going off in your head until the next body appears there. That said, the writing within the trials themselves is excellent, honestly probably better than ever before. General scenarios are easy to guess, but the particulars of the plans enacted are more difficult to figure out, and provide some great eureka moments when you bust a hole in the killer's plan, which is high praise for any one of these stories. The writing is also sharper thematically. Without the relentless assault of the hope and despair buzzwords, it has much more room for more interpretative or otherwise subtler moments bolstering a greater meaning to the story. Dalliances with trust, lies, and grief may not seem like very original ideas, but at least the meaning of those words isn't diluted to nothing in this one. But even that highlights my overall mood towards killing harmony. It just feels a lot more standard this time around. It's never aggressively bad, and the second half is much closer to a satisfying narrative, but failing to properly integrate the overall mystery with the killing game makes the overall package more bland, and you have to be really patient to get to the great parts. Like, I do think it has its place in the franchise, but compared to its forebearers, none of the individual plot points really grabbed me one way or the other. With two exceptions. So this is your big spoiler warning for the end of the first chapter, the end of the first trial. I beat this game so fast, I haven't had the time to talk about it with any of my usual friends, but I saw red after this point. And if you know why this is, then you know. And if you don't know, this is the part where you skip ahead or stop watching the video. Is that warning loaded enough? Okay, let's go. So you'll notice so far I've only been showing footage from the first chapter so far, which should be a given, right? Even showing bits of later chapters could give away who survives, which is an implicit spoiler in itself. But in this game it goes even deeper. Here's the most innocuous screenshot I can find of chapter 2. And here's literally any old screenshot of chapter 1. Notice the difference? There are a lot of pieces of media that have a different protagonist from the prologue. Saw 2 the game comes to mind. But there are startlingly few games that make such a radical change with the sudden loss of a protagonist. Even Red Dead Redemption's is signposted and makes sense, and it's at the end of the game. But you're seeing this right. Not only does Kaede die in chapter 1, she is the first blackened of the killing game. Okay, so do you remember that part in Heavy Rain where Scott Shelby turned out to be the killer, and then it flashed back to the scene in the knick-knack shop where he apparently killed the owner, even though when you played as Shelby in that chapter that literally didn't happen? That plot point was annoying because it breaks the immersion and inner consistency of the story, and robs the player of agency and involvement because it has to actively lie to us for its plot twist to work.
After I had left, and rolled it into the...
No, she didn't! That literally didn't happen while we were in control of this first-person story with internal fucking monologues and observations. And you don't know how much it pains me to compare Danganronpa to a David Cage game, but it's the truth. The outcome of Chapter 1 is that moment of Heavy Rain, mixed with the moment in MGS2 that you realise, oh, I have to play as Raiden for the rest of the game. I don't know, Shuichi's not a bad protagonist. Like I said, he has a unique perspective on grief with how Kaede was killed, but for the game to take her away from us, not just from the class, but from us, like that, it's risky. And whether or not it's actively cheap, it feels that way, and left a sour taste in my mouth. Thank God I'm more patient now. If this was 2011, I'd have thrown V3 into the same pile of garbage as LA Noire. Character deaths from then on are upsetting, but it's in the usual way. Oh man, they were cool, I wanted them to make it. That's the expectation. This fell into my blind spot. Furthermore, where have I heard this before? One crisis at a time. The second plot point that stood out to me was, once again, the ending, which I am not going to spoil here. But remember how I said things like, when I hit the big plot twist of the game, my reaction was a little something like this. What? Or, that ending seriously makes it all worth it. Well, forget all that. They have nothing on the finale to Killing Harmony. It must be seen to be believed, and I deeply wish I had an avenue to talk about it. So I made one. Yes, I decided to make an entirely separate video talking about the ending because, shit, I have to discuss this thing somewhere. It should go without saying that clicking on that video puts you at risk of all the spoilers, but hopefully I've signposted that enough too. Suffice to say, it compensates for the game's weaknesses in a big way, but it can't save it from being the weakest of the mainline series, albeit not by a whole lot. The problem with such an assessment comes down to the value proposition the game provides. Listen, 1 and 2 have been ported to so many other platforms and are so old that you can grab them cheap enough if you know when and where to look. V3, on the other hand, is full price on Steam. As loath as I am to align artistic quality with the financial offset, $60 is too much. This one does come with more bonus modes than usual, but it's not enough. Even as a massive fan, I feel a little shortchanged, but then again, everyone else I know will buy the new hotness every time. If I'm only burned once for something I was going to get it launched anyway, I can't complain too much. But nor can I advise everyone to buy it now, like I could last time. And if I can't believe I can do that for my favourite gaming franchise ever, what can I believe in?